Hello, and welcome to How Do You Keep Well, the podcast where you unlock the secrets of feeling amazing in your body, in your mind, and in your soul. Thank you so much for joining us this lovely afternoon. We're live and direct from the United Kingdom. I'm Dr. Jaye. I'm your host, I'm your cheerleader, and I'm your guide as we navigate this fascinating world of women's health and well-being in this season of the podcast. Now, as I always say, if you're ready to laugh, if you're ready to learn, if you're ready to take charge of your health, you've come to the right place. And today I'm joined by Dr. Tonye Wokoma. Good afternoon, Dr. Tonye.
Hello, Jai. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming over as well. I know you had a busy schedule and you squeezed me in, and I'm always so grateful for this. Dr. Tonya is a consultant in sexual and reproductive health. Have you heard of that before? Well, if you haven't, that's the reason you have to stay put and listen to us on this podcast this afternoon. Dr. Tanya is also a menopause specialist. I know she's a teacher of teachers. She's taught a lot of doctors and she treats a lot of people as well. And together we'll be diving into a very important topic and one that isn't talked about enough, and is women's sexual health in midlife. From my own personal experience as a GP and a GP interested in women's health, I have seen so many women, and a lot of them actually have to pluck up the courage to talk about their sexual life. And I'm sure Dr. Tanya will be sharing some of our experiences with us. We would explore what happens to the body and the real reasons why many women feel uncomfortable, down there. What's normal? And I know a lot of people go to Google University, Dr. Google, and they Google their symptoms late in the night, wondering whether what they feel is normal. So we would be hearing all about that, what's not normal, and what can be done. Most importantly, and the reason I do this podcast is to give you the confidence and the courage to ask for help. So I hope at the end of today you would have learned something. So Dr. Tonya, welcome once again.
Thank you.
And to start, I would like you to tell us a bit about your journey, how you ended up in sexual and reproductive health, and how you ended up becoming a menopause specialist as well.
No, thank you. Thank you, Jai. Thanks for that introduction as well, because that explains it. My background is obstetrics and gynecology, but I've always been interested in empowering women to take control of their sexual and reproductive health. And by that, I mean not just to do with sex, but to do with contraception, to do with their reproductive health, to help them manage some of the things that the conditions that happen to do with that, endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, those sorts of things. So we can manage that in our clinics, but it is a very satisfying career. And that's the reason I've focused on it and I'm interested in it and I'm passionate about it, because when you see yourself helping women, women are not just an individual. They're pillars of their family. They're pillars of society. They are the workforce nowadays. It is so satisfying to see and gratifying to see that the help that you've offered them, the support that you've given them has been very, very helpful and made a huge difference in their lives and in the lives of their families.
Absolutely. I always say this, that when women thrive, communities thrive. Because,
Absolutely.
a woman is just the glue that holds fabric, the society, the glue that holds the fabric together, the society together.
Yeah.
So I always strongly believe it, and I think we share that passion together. But yours is at that level. I'm
No,
still learning
no,
from you.
we're all doing the little that we can do. No, so that's
Absolutely.
fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So, Dr. Tanya, today I'm going to go sharp and sweet. I like starting each of my session with some quick fire questions, kind of breaking the myth and just guiding our listeners to some of the conversations we'll be having later on. Now, I think I have maybe 5 or 6 questions. We see how we get on. But first of all, in 1 or 2 sentences, Dr. Tanya,
Wow. Okay. Go for it. Let's go for it. No
let's go for
problem.
it. Now, I'm going to start. I know sexual and reproductive health encompasses a lot more than just sex, but this first question is about sex, and I just asked for your permission with this one. Does menopause mean the end of your sex life?
The simple answer is no. Menopause is the start of a new chapter in life, and the more women are prepared for the perimenopause and the menopause, the better their postmenopausal life will be.
Amazing. Thank you. That was short and sweet. I'll go to the next question. Now, people think vaginal dryness is just a normal part of aging and you have to live with it. Do you agree with this, and why? And or why
Vaginal
not?
dryness can happen as we go into the menopause. It can be normal, but you don't have to live with it. You don't have to suffer with it. The consequences of vaginal dryness includes things like painful sex. No, that is not a part of a woman's life. So,
Mm.
yes, it can be normal. No, you don't have to live with it. And there are simple things that you can do, a woman can do to help.
Simple things you can do. I can't wait to hear about this. Honestly, it's always amazing when people receive that light. Like, really? There's
Yeah.
help out there. And that's what we hope to bring. Now, this is a bit of a controversial question, but I would ask because this is one time. Let's sort this question out. Can Viagra help women?
Viagra isn't licensed for female sexual dysfunction, but I have seen where people have been prescribed sildenafil, so Viagra. And for some people, especially women who have sexual difficulties, perhaps after cancer, where there's reduced blood flow to the area, there may be a place. We don't tend to use it often, but there may be a place, not
Hmm.
just for the general public, but for specific groups of women.
That's interesting. I thought so as well, but I wasn't too sure. Now, what about this testosterone? Is that only for men?
No, testosterone isn't only for men, and ovaries produce certain hormones, which we identify as female hormones, estrogen and progestogen. But they also produce a tiny bit of testosterone, and testosterone is useful for libido as well as sometimes for energy and other things as well. And we
Mm.
know that testosterone replacement in women can be helpful for libido issues in some women.
Thank you very much. So we are getting there. So there is hope. So really, you can't just give up without asking for help if you're listening
Absolutely.
to me.
Absolutely.
Now, if you're not sexually active, you don't have a partner, do you still need to worry about your sexual health as a woman in midlife?
Completely. And we've talked about a little, we've alluded to it a little bit already, that it's more than just sex. Sex is important for general well being and a woman's health, but it's looking after your reproductive organs. It's making sure as you go into the post-menopause, you are at the peak of life. And that's by making sure your urinary system is functioning properly, you're doing what you can, you're doing your pelvic floor exercises, you're keeping your body generally healthy, but particularly your reproductive organs. So it's not only about sex, and there's lots that we can do to look after that part of it and not just to not think about it.
Absolutely. I've seen women in my practice come back with distressing symptoms, just on for their own personal well-being. And you feel
Yes.
like really it can be quite a big issue for women. So definitely there are solutions. Again, I keep hampering on this. There are solutions out there. Just ask for help. Now, the last and the final question, there's still more questions, but for this round, would you say HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy for menopause, would it fix everything, including sexual reproductive health problems in women in midlife?
HRT is very effective treatment for some of the symptoms of the menopause. However, experience shows that the symptoms of the menopause are because not just of biology, but a woman's psychological well-being, what the societal expectations are, what our culture is, our cultural background. So it's all those things that contribute to a woman's menopause experience. And it's all those things that we need to navigate and we need to perhaps change to ensure that the woman has the best menopause experience that she can have. So HRT is very effective. I would encourage people to consider it if they need to, but it's not the be all and end all.
It's not the be all and end all. I like that. Thank you very much for clarifying that because sometimes you worry that many people don't. And I like how you describe it as the menopause experience. It's the bridge between perimenopause, postmenopause, and is a transition for many women. And it's
Yes.
really important to highlight that fact that there's the biological side, there's the psychological side, and there's so many other things involved. I recently did a course on placing taking menopause as part of the aging kind of science, and it helps us. It brings a lot of light to the fact that it's not just your ovaries that are aging. There are so many different organs aging in the body, so we really need to be looking after that as well.
It's a stage in life, isn't it, Jaya? And you see this very well in as in your practice, I'm sure. And it's we need to look after women through all the life stages. But this is a time where women can actually sit back and think, okay, what do I need to do for myself?
Hmm.
Again, it's not just about medication, it's about lifestyle, it's about diet, it's about exercise, it's about psychological well-being. So there's so many things that go into it, but the important thing is to educate ourselves and become more aware.
That's definitely, and like I said, it's that stage of life when you can begin to think about yourself a bit more and look after yourself a bit more. So I'm going to go to this bit where, and I say this as a practitioner myself, as a healthcare practitioner. Why do you think in midlife, women's sexual health is often overlooked, or why is it maybe misunderstood? Maybe your own thoughts about that, and perhaps if you can explain some of the concerns you have heard in your own practice from women about their sexual health in their 40s and their 50s. I've put two questions in one there.
No, no problem. We'll try and unpick them as we go along. And as we get older, we acquire more responsibilities, life gets busy, and life can sometimes get in the way of us looking after ourselves as women, particularly because we're often caregivers. So we're the ones who are looking after children, who may be looking after parents, and all this can have an impact. So we're described as the sandwich generation. Usually you would have teenage children or children going off away to university. You might have elderly, frail parents that you're also looking after. And all that can often be very overwhelming, Jaya, as you know, and can be difficult for some women. So that possibly takes front and center. That's priority. That's what you're busy doing.
Mm.
But the thing to remind women about is that you need to be at the top of your game to be able to carry out these functions as effectively as possible, which means looking after your well being, looking after not just your sexual health, your physical health, your emotional health, your mental health, and your sexual and reproductive health. So your reproductive organs, often this is where, because that's where the hormones are secreted, and that's what, as you go through the menopause, the hormones begin to deplete. Understanding more about it, being aware of what it will entail, what might come, and what you can do to minimize some of the issues, some of the symptoms that may come. So I
Mm.
think the message from all this, which is what you're doing, and I'd really like to congratulate you, Jai, for doing these podcasts and putting them on, is you must be aware of your own health. You must take control of your own health. You can't outsource it to anybody else. It is your responsibility. You need to know about it, and you need to be able to seek help if needed. But that
Mm.
only comes if you think there is an issue and
Issue.
you can seek help for it, and perhaps understanding what help is out there and understanding what medication can help and what you can do yourself
Mm. So
in
you
terms
know,
of lifestyle.
yes, absolutely. You mentioned knowing what to look for. Some people are not even aware that, some of the issues they are facing can be dealt with in terms of both medically and even with their lifestyle. And they just assume, "Well, let's keep going. Hopefully this thing will just stop." Or, many people even say they're just praying about it.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
sorts of issues come in, and I hear all sorts of different things every day from all sorts of different people. Now, from your own perspective as a consultant in sexual and reproductive health, I'm a bit curious. What are the common sexual health concerns women in their 40s and in their 50s come to talk to you about, just generally?
Yeah, so the main ones are menopause symptoms, and that includes the constellation of symptoms that people experience: the hot flushes, the sweats, the one that bothers them the most, the psychological symptoms that they get, the irritability, the anger, the crying, the brain fog, the sleep issues, the loss of libido. That can be quite distressing for some women. The weight gain, we tend to
That's
put
always an
on
issue.
2 to 3 kilos every year, perhaps. And it's important to watch your diet. And there's lots of other things. I mean, I know you want to talk specifically about the genitourinary syndrome of the menopause, because that's often not spoken about. So those
Mm,
symptoms in general, and there's lots of other symptoms that they present with around that time. But we mustn't forget that women are still fertile at this time. So they come to talk about contraception as well, and the contraception that's suitable for them at that particular stage in life. They may be
mm,
experiencing heavy periods because, again, in the perimenopause and the menopause transition, periods can become, because periods change, they can, and that's often the first sign, they can become heavier, they can become more prolonged. So again, that can be an issue, and they come to speak about that as well. Again, there's things that we can do to help rather than
mm,
people just putting up with it and thinking that this is going to get better or is going to go away. Again, it's
mm,
important to seek help. So it's lots of things. The other issue that they often come to speak about are psychosexual difficulties that they
mm,
sometimes
mm,
experience as they go into midlife as
mm,
well. So
mm.
it could be a variety of things that they come with. It could be physical symptoms, and there's often an overlay of emotional. I mean, because these symptoms are distressing.
Absolutely. There's just a combination. And like you said, there's a lot, there's the emotional aspect of it. And also at that stage in life, for many people, couples, people with, all in relationship, they're finding that what they really need is just that deep connection with
Yes,
others. And
yes.
often life is so busy that they're not managing to have that deep connection, in addition to some of the distressing symptoms that you've talked about. And it just affects the quality of life so much, so that sometimes I find that being a women's health GP, sometimes what I have to do is just sit down there to listen to people, because they just deeply desire that deep connection, which I think goes a long way. And that's why I agree completely with you about what you said about the psychosexual aspects of this stage of life. It's not just the sexual, but it's also the psychological kind of symptoms that come with it. What do you think with these issues? We've already talked about that there are a lot of them are treatable. Do you think some of them are reversible as well? Especially things like vaginal dryness or stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So often what happens with women is that they plod on and they plod on, and then they become overwhelmed
Mm,
by the symptoms, which is exactly what you're describing. Actually, all you need to do is to be there for somebody to offload onto you.
mm,
This impacts the woman herself, it impacts her work, it
mm,
impacts her marriage or relationship, it
mm,
impacts the care she's able to give to her children or her loved ones. And these are usually women that have coped up until this point. They've juggled everything, they've been in charge, they've known what to do, where to go, how to do, and suddenly things aren't functioning as well. So the approach is, it's a multi-pronged strategy, is absolutely you must go and seek help from an approachable GP where you can develop the rapport, who will allow you to speak.
mm.
Because in some cases women don't even, they just don't something's not right is what they come to say to you. Something's not
I
right.
know. I hear that a lot.
Yes, and it's just being there to listen to the story, to be able to help them understand what might not be right and what
Mm,
can they can do about
mm,
it.
mm,
But there's some things that are easily treated, was your question, which is why it's important as much as possible. And it may not be just with medication. Sometimes
mm.
it's the understanding, it's that light bulb moment of
Yes.
this is actually normal. I'm not going
Yes.
crazy. There's
Yes.
nothing wrong with my mind. There's strategies I can use to be able to understand and manage my life, or I
Mm,
might want to go on to medication. And
mm,
I always say to women that even apart from hormone replacement therapy, because there is stigma in some societies, in some cultures attached to that, but there's also stigma attached to mental health issues, which is, there is quite a lot of mental health issues as well. So it's being open minded about what to expect and what might be impacting on the symptoms that people
definitely.
are experiencing.
Definitely. And that's why I find that menopause sometimes is like a bit of a storm in a teacup, because there's so much going on. Like you rightly said, the sandwich generation. Some people even call it the panini generation, where people kind of are squeezed from everywhere, squeezed from everywhere. And it takes such a presence of mind to help you realize that, look, I can talk about this. I can find an approachable GP. And sometimes what people do is they come to test me a little bit with something completely unrelated. And then once they feel that you're able to talk, or your practitioner is able to talk, then they go back and then they begin to talk about the real issues. And I think that's absolutely fine. If that's what you have to do, do it. Talk to them, then go back again and talk about what the real issues are. Okay. I want us to do some breaking things down a little bit more. Now, you mentioned the genitourinary syndrome of menopause. I think that's such a big word, but under that big umbrella, a lot of things is packed under it. How does this actually typically show up in midlife? Again, this is just to help people know that, what you're feeling you can get help for it.
Yeah. So as estrogen levels fall as women get older, this can result in vaginal dryness. Just to put it simply, it's actually a change in the mucosa in the skin in the vagina, which becomes more fragile. It becomes more susceptible to injury. It becomes, dry. It feels uncomfortable. Of course, that can then impact on sexual intercourse. So it can make sex more painful, more uncomfortable, and women begin to avoid intercourse. It may be because there's also estrogen receptors in the bladder. It could be that there is some bladder, symptoms as well. So urgency and frequency, wanting to pass urine. If you want to go, you need to going to the loo frequently, waking up at night on several occasions to go to use the toilet. Again, simple strategies, reducing the amount of coffee, reducing the amount of caffeine-based drinks, coffee, tea that you drink in the daytime can help support your bladder and help you stop waking up in the middle of the night, because sleep deprivation isn't good. And once you get into a pattern of waking up to go to the loo, coming back, not being able to sleep because you're experiencing menopause symptoms, all that is
It
make
adds
life
up.
very challenging and very interesting. So we've talked about the vaginal dryness, the sexual difficulties, the bladder irritation,
Mm,
and just using something as simple as vaginal estrogen,
mm,
as you know, can
mm,
be very helpful for settling some of these symptoms down,
mm, mm,
increasing the moisture in the vagina, making sex more comfortable and more pleasurable,
mm.
and making life as a whole much more
Easier to manage.
easier to manage, much more rewarding. I mean, we mustn't forget, we always encourage people to do pelvic floor exercises because that will help prevent things like prolapse in the future.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But GSM is just that big umbrella word, fancy word for we used to call it vaginal atrophy in the past, for vaginal
mm-hmm,
dryness, bladder, bit of bladder irritation, bladder
mm,
weakness, etc. And
mm.
and the other thing that people sometimes don't mention is the vaginal, not just dryness, irritation,
Yes.
vaginal vaginitis of sorts. They get
Mm.
symptoms of a discharge and a soreness. All these things can be because
And
the
some people
vagina
get
is,
treated for thrush all the time. I mean,
yes.
I've had a woman. I remember when I was a younger GP, I didn't know so much about perimenopause at the time. And I had this woman who constantly had vaginitis, and we were swabbing her all the time, and there was no thrush. But she insisted that she had thrush. So we had to find the strongest canesten cream to give her. And she said, yes, that one works. But looking back now, I wondered if she just had, vaginitis, inflammation and irritation of the vagina due to low
It's
estrogen level.
possible, but then, as you know, there's other reasons for recurrent thrush as well. So again, it depends on the individual. It depends on how they present and what it is they're seeking. But there's so many of these things that are shrouded in secrecy, as
It
you've
is.
alluded to, Jay. People don't talk about them. They don't mention them. They don't discuss it.
No,
And that's what we're doing here. It's just shedding that light. It's
I
okay.
know.
It's okay to go and speak to someone about
I'm
it.
breaking that taboo.
Yeah.
People feel like, and I can understand if you feel a little bit awkward at first, but you have to remember that most of the doctors you speak to are human beings themselves, but they also a lot of them have been trained, so they understand. So it's just important to talk about it, because you will realize that actually it's not as bad as you're playing it up in your mind in terms of the actual process of talking about it. So let's break the taboo. Let's shake some tables.
Very, very occasionally, it could be something serious. So
Mm,
again, it's to encourage people to please seek help and just get somebody to have a look
that's
and offer
correct.
the right treatment.
That's correct. Now, you've talked about some of the treatments available, and we've kind of mentioned things like medical treatment and lifestyle factors. And I like the example you gave about just simple tweaking your routine, having your coffee or your caffeine earlier in the day, reducing the quantity you take makes a lot of difference to how you wake up. Can you give us a bit more idea of some of the other kind of lifestyle? So for example, I know we talk about a lot of weight gain in women when going through this transitional time and in menopause. I can imagine this would have an impact on, the life generally, but also all these other symptoms. But I just wonder if there are lifestyle factors, other lifestyle factors that you feel might be useful for women.
I think women tend to notice what triggers their symptoms. And one of the things I say to women is that when you think, I'm not right, what exactly is it that's not right? So keep a journal, keep a diary. What symptoms are you experiencing? How long are they going on for? What is it that might be triggering the symptoms? Because women quickly recognize that things like alcohol will make their flushing and sweating worse, will annoy their bladder a little bit more. Now, if you choose to do it occasionally, of course, that's fine. But it's when it's on a consistent basis. So things like coffee, and it's not unusual to see people drinking up to 10 cups of coffee in a day.
I wonder how they manage, to be honest with you.
Coffee in itself can sometimes be addictive. And if you haven't had a good night's sleep, you need something to perk you up and you need something to keep going. But of course, that's just a vicious cycle because it's annoying your bladder no end and it's
Mm,
irritating the bladder. So just reducing the amount of coffee and caffeine that people are drinking, ensuring you're drinking clear fluids, water. Water
mm,
is your friend. You know,
mm,
people think if I don't drink coffee, okay, I'll drink tea, but tea contains caffeine as well. So
mm.
we need to recognize that it's,
Do you think decaffeinated tea, coffee makes
yeah.
any
So
difference?
I do suggest that switching to decaf might be useful because you're still getting the taste somewhat, and it's a hot drink which you might prefer.
Mm,
So switching to decaf may well be the answer that you need. And as you've said already, drinking the coffee and tea earlier on in the day. Coffee
mm,
and tea, they have, I mean, caffeine has quite a long half life. So then that impacts
mm,
on sleep.
mm, mm.
If you're drinking it, I'll have a cup of coffee at dinner time, and then you're not sleeping well at night. The other thing I say to women is have a look at what you're having for your evening meal, because that has an impact on how well you sleep, how, apart from obviously avoiding alcohol if needed, reducing the amount of tea and coffee, eating carbs or processed sugars, especially at dinner time, can increase the number of flushes that people experience. So again, and when you're not sleeping properly, when you're stressed, that contributes to weight gain, which is, so they're all interlinked. It's all very connected.
Very complex, isn't it?
If you don't sleep properly, you won't eat properly because you'll be looking for your sugar rush. So it's looking at life holistically. Start with
Absolutely.
one thing and taking it from there.
Absolutely. I completely agree with those lifestyle factors you've mentioned there and how sleep plays a crucial role, especially with our circadian rhythm and,
Yeah.
how cortisol and melatonin and, there's so many complex things. But you mentioned something really important there, what people eat at night time and the impact it has on hot flushes. And recently I was reading maybe a journal about, they talk a lot about protein, high protein diet everywhere. And we know this is not for everyone. And one of the things they mentioned in that journal was the amount of energy it takes to break down the protein in your diet can actually trigger a lot of hot flushes for a lot of women as well. So, in fact, it's recommended for many people if you can have your meals a lot earlier at night or a lot earlier in the evening, makes a lot of difference, as well as maybe exploring vegetarian options, reducing the amount of protein at night before going. And I know for a lot of perhaps in the kind of culture I have, they tend to leave the big meals to the night time where they have a lot of protein in like really big meals and it takes a lot. But the other thing I like that you mentioned is address one factor at a time. When you putting too many things, you get confused. But focus on one area. If you want to focus on your sleep, focus on your sleep. If you want to focus on managing your stress, your diet, focus on it. And there are so many other factors you can focus on. Well, thank you very much. One of the other things you mentioned was pelvic floor therapy. Can you tell us a bit more about that, Dr. Tonye?
So pelvic floor exercises, we should all be doing our pelvic floor.
I felt myself kind of squeeze when you talked about it.
We should all be doing, especially after childbirth. But everybody, whether you've been pregnant or not before, should be doing pelvic floor exercises just to keep the tone of the pelvic floor, which helps to control urinary urine, helps to control, it helps with sexual intercourse, it helps with our bowels as well. We need to avoid being constipated. We need to
Mm,
avoid having a cough that goes on and on and on. If people are smoking, they need to cut down or reduce. So those things that can put pressure on the pelvic floor, particularly weight. Weight is a big culprit. If possible, maintain the recommended weight for our height. All those things will certainly help our pelvic floor. And when I say pelvic floor, it's not just the vagina. We're talking about the bladder. We're talking about our bowels and our rectum as well. But
mm.
exercises, and there are lots of exercises on the internet that people can Google to be able to do pelvic floor exercises. There are women's health physiotherapists. Sometimes it's very difficult to feel if you are using the right muscles. And this may be where you might want to get devices that can give you biofeedback. And there's several of them out there in the market. But you could also see a women's health physio who will actually take you through these exercises. They have machines that they can use now that can help tone up the muscles on the pelvic floor. And you know, everyone's different. Everyone's got different issues to do with their pelvic floor. It's not just about tone. It's about, so sometimes it's important to see the professional, but you could start by doing simple things like just contracting and getting reps that you can do. And it's on the internet. You mentioned Dr. Google. This is where it can be useful.
It can be used very useful. I know my teacher, my Pilates teacher always talks, squeeze, are you squeezing those muscles? And then she talks about first floor, second floor, like you really need to squeeze and bring those muscles right to the top.
Absolutely.
And it takes sometimes a bit of reminder here and there, but as often as possible is recommended. And I, because of the kind of clinic I run, I see a lot of, oh my goodness, I see a lot of women who have pelvic floor prolapse. It is such a disabling condition, honestly. And if you can do anything to avoid getting to that stage, I think it is worth it. I've seen women who can't walk their dogs. I've seen women who can't go to the shops. I've seen women who have to sit down when they take their grandchildren to the parks because they're or looking out for the toilets. I don't know if you ever noticed when you go to the parks, this big fairground, the women queue line is always the longest.
Mm, mm.
But definitely whatever you can do to it may not be preventable as such, but at least you can reduce the risks or intensity of the prolapse that you get by just doing the pelvic floor exercises.
Drinking the right thing, eating the right thing, doing it at the right time, and then doing pelvic floor exercises, and then making it
Sleeping.
more comfortable. So it's not, we've talked about vaginal estrogen, but there's vaginal moisturizers out there that are very
Yes,
good. There's vaginal lubricants that people can use with sex.
that's
So
correct.
there's a whole range of different things that people could use too.
Before we kind of rounding up now, I know you mentioned testosterone, and there's still a lot of it's still a lot of secrecy around it, a lot of worry, a lot of concerns about using testosterone. Is there any word of advice or recommendations you would have to just maybe put people at rest, or maybe help people to seek help about
Yeah.
this?
So, testosterone, the evidence we have is that testosterone is useful for libido. Testosterone isn't for everyone. It doesn't work for everyone because the issues to do with libido, whether it's lack of sexual desire, whether it's lack of orgasm, lack of sensation, it's all multifactorial as to why it happens. So I do say to women when we talk about testosterone to try and manage expectations that it may not work. It doesn't work for everybody and not everybody wants it. But testosterone can be very, very useful for some people. In addition to, of course, doing the pelvic floor exercises, ensuring that there is no vaginal dryness and that you're comfortable and sex is something that you want to do and is pleasurable to do. So we don't have a licensed preparation in the UK, so we tend to use off license what it is that we give to men. We just use it much more cautiously. We advise women about what the side effects might be and what to do if some of those side effects happen, and how to use the testosterone. With testosterone, unlike with HRT, we measure bloods to ensure that the range, the testosterone remains within the normal range for
Mm,
the woman, and
mm.
to make sure she is absorbing it a little bit and it's not too high as well. So it has its place. We always advise that women use it usually after they've been on HRT, because it works best if a woman is well estrogenized, is the way I describe it.
Mm,
But because the body is very clever, testosterone, a bit of it can be converted to estrogen. So if your estrogen receptors aren't fully saturated, then it may not work as well for what
mm,
we want it to do.
mm,
But
mm.
absolutely, it's something that is very, very useful, and it's good to have as part of the armament of things that we can use with
In this time of life,
this time of life.
I once had a client who came specifically just for testosterone and didn't want HLT. And I thought, well, it has a bit of a dilemma because, like you rightly said, we can't prescribe one without the other, unfortunately, because of those reasons you've talked about. Testosterone would end up being converted to estrogen in the body.
In some people, they can try it on its own, but it may not be as effective.
Effective. And I've heard of all sorts of different ways people get testosterone, and I'm always kind of, "Whoa, okay, I never knew that existed." I don't really want to go into all of that because personally I don't have those kind of experiences. But you hear of people using all sorts of cream.
Yeah.
One of the things I've heard about people do, and if you don't mind me asking, this is probably out of the context of our conversation, but I would ask, is how people tend to want to use progesterone on its own without anything else. So I don't know what your views are on that as a menopause specialist. So I've heard of people just using progesterone cream or yam cream, and I thought, okay, how does that work without estrogen? So is it possible to use something like progesterone on its own
So we
without
haven't got
estrogen?
the evidence for progesterone cream, and one of the things that is usually said is that it's difficult for progesterone to be absorbed transdermally through the skin. So, but I have seen women like you have that have tried it and have said that it is working for them, but it's, all we could say is there isn't the evidence that it's effective.
Mm,
Now, we know that HRT, as we prescribe, as is recommended, is made up of two hormones. It's made up of estrogen and it's made up of progesterone or progestogen. And if you have a uterus, you must have both because the progestogen protects the lining of the womb. Now, some people, for whatever reason, may not be on estrogen and seem to try progestogen or progesterone, and it seems to help them. So it's not anybody's first line,
mm.
but certainly we have seen it in clinics.
And then maybe the other question I have, and somebody asked me this question as well, was some of the treatments you can have for vaginal dryness, and you hear all sorts on the internet. So somebody told me about coconut oil. And somebody told me about berry oil. I thought, oh my goodness, I've not heard of that before. I don't know what your thoughts are with using all those kind of oils.
I mean, extra virgin coconut oil. I sometimes ask women to do a vulval massage because when things are uncomfortable down below, as women describe it, it is about getting them back in touch with their bodies, recognizing what hurts and what doesn't hurt. And because what happens with women is that if something's hurting, the instinct is to tense up and to pull away. And then it leads to that condition called vaginismus, where there's unconscious tightening or contracting of the vaginal muscles, which then leads to painful intercourse, etc. So it's just desensitizing all those areas, and coconut oil can be very useful for that. I'm sorry, I don't know what berry oil is, but again, it may be something that may be used, but just massaging the vulva. And I do get quite good results with saying, actually, just 10 minutes, 5 minutes on an evening, just do some vulval massage. When people were pregnant back in the day, they used to say, oh, you needed to stretch the perineum so that when it comes to time for delivery, it's possible. I mean, they may be old wives' tales, but sometimes they can
This
be
didn't have
helpful.
some background to it, some scientific background that maybe we've just not discovered,
Yeah.
or researched as such. Wow, thank you so much. That was really enlightening for personally for me as a medical professional, but also for many of our listeners. And we're beginning to round up now. I want to say thank you once again, Dr. Wokoma, for your time and for some of the simple explanation you've given us. I do hope a lot of our listeners have taken on board some of your recommendations, but also in particular the fact that you can go and ask for help. And I think that's the bottom line of forget the porn of what we are talking about today. And just as living thoughts, Dr. Taya, what one thing would you wish every woman knew about their body in midlife?
Exactly that statement. Know your body.
Mm,
Know your body so you recognize when it's changing. And when it's changing, don't gaslight yourself.
mm.
If you need to seek help, go and get some help.
Amazing, amazing. And that seems to be the advice I keep hearing all the time. Know your body, be aware of it, and go and ask for help. Would you recommend any resources at all? Maybe a book if somebody wanted to read a book about this, or a community, or a website, anything along those lines that you might be able to recommend?
There's loads of resources. I mean, the British Menopause Society, Women's Health Concern, they do have loads and loads of resources. But somebody reminded me just today about a book I contributed to called Cracking the Menopause by Mariella Frostrup. But
Wow.
and I was like, oh yeah, that was a while ago, but it's quite a good book. So again, I'll put in a plug for that. But there's
Absolutely.
loads of reputable resources. If you go to the British Menopause Society website or the Women's Health Concern website.
I will definitely be putting that out. The cracking the menopause. I have to go and look for it. And
Excellent.
And where can we connect with you if there are listeners who want to explore a bit more with you some of what you've talked about, or some of the work you do with menopause or sexual reproductive health? Is there anywhere they can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. On social media, Dr._T Wokoma.
That's great. That's great. I know I'll put that out there for everybody as well. And again, thank you so much for this afternoon of talking about, the midlife and also the sexual health in midlife. The most important person is you. As a woman, it's time to look after yourself. It's time to recognize your symptoms, but it's time to stop gaslighting yourself. I really like that, and I like the fact that, you have to use midlife as that point in time to recharge your body, recognize, seek for help, and begin to focus on, even if it's just one area of
Yes.
your lifestyle, focus on it, do it well. If there's anything disturbing your sleep, find out, identify what it is, pinpoint it, try to get some help. And also things like stress or your sleep or your exercise, just focus on it one step at a time. You will get there. Thank you so much. And please, listeners, subscribe to Dr. Wokoma. I have looked at her Instagram page, very helpful. I always like seeing some of the talks and some of the links you put on there, very, very helpful.
Yeah.
And please subscribe and follow Dr. Jai as well. Thank you very much. We would always be bringing interesting episodes on midlife and women's health in general. But thank you so much, Dr. Tonye. I really appreciate the time, and hopefully we will speak again soon.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, that's it for today. Bye bye, everyone. And thank
Bye
you
bye.
once again for listening to us. Bye.